Hi everyone, my name is Rosie Kramer, and this is the first episode of my new podcast, The Evident Bias. I'll let my guests here introduce themselves, and then I'll explain what the show is all about.
Hi, I'm Kathleen Graham. I am 19, I'm a sophomore, and I am a new media major with a film studies minor.
Hi, I'm Brenna Desborough. I'm 21. I'm a senior, and I'm an art therapy and psychology major.
Hi, I'm Melissa Marino, and I'm a freshman. I'm 18, and my major is biology.
Hi, I'm Kendall Nichols. I am a political science major with history and communications minor. I'm a junior. I'm 21.
I just want to say thank you for all of you coming out to participate in this podcast. It's the first episode, so I'm very excited that you're all here. So as I said before, this podcast is titled The Evident Bias. Every single day, we are surrounded by and exposed to media in whatever form it may take. However, the bias in our media is not always apparent to the naked eye. Sometimes we scroll our social media and see 10 posts about the same topic, but they're worded differently, so we don't realize that we're only seeing one type of post or one side of the story, making it inherently biased. Today's podcast will hopefully teach you about what that bias looks like and how you can reframe your media to get a better understanding of the whole picture. So my first question for you all is, what platforms and methods do you include when you define the term media?
Well, I think, especially because I am in the communications major, I consider most things to be media, so pretty much anything on the internet I consider, any music, any books, any newspapers, pretty much I consider that all to be media, and then like movies, television, I would consider that all to be media.
I think, in general, the way I tend to define it is a group or a singular person creating something and then that something being spread to multiple people, which isn't a perfect definition, and it kind of leads more into mass media, but that idea of creation and then the spread of it.
I was gonna say that also when I think of media, I think of medium and art, because you have mixed media pieces, and that's I guess media is also the tool you're using.
So, kind of going off of what you were saying, that, when I think of media, I kind of think about how people have an idea and they want to spread that idea, so then they use some sort of platform or something in their grasp to spread what they want to say.
So you're thinking of the platform itself as the media, or the message, would you say?
Maybe their thought, their opinion.
Their message?
Yeah, their message.
Yeah, I would say kind of bouncing between the two. I think that a lot of times the message of the person or the intent is what drives the media through different mediums. Like Katie had said, there's a ton to choose from because there is all the digital versions, but then there's journalism, there's art, there's basically anything you can think of. And so I think of that aspect of it as just a tool to help guide the message.
All right. So based off of your individual definitions and what you've heard from each other, how much then would you say that you interact with media every day?
I mean, my iPhone reports that I spent 9 hours and 30 minutes a day on my phone this week, or last week, so I'd say about 9 hours of that was media.
I would honestly say not all of my waking hours, but I mean my phone says 8 hours or something. But when I'm not on my phone, I'm on my computer. And a lot of my hobbies, I think, have to do with media. So I feel like I'm either watching something or working on something. And I would maybe say, excluding, work or, school, maybe 10 hours I'd give myself. I'm going to say 10 hours.
So would you say it's more for you because you're a comms major and you spend more time with this?
I think even more than just being in the major, a lot of my hobbies, I love TV is my life. So I'm watching TV, I'm talking about TV, I'm like discussing it, I'm working on my own versions of things. So I think as just like my personality is very mediated.
I would say, yeah, I kind of agree with what Katie had said, where a lot of my time is spent around media. I think that is, again, partly due to my area of study, but then also just through my own interest. But then, like, I'm thinking about it, and I print out pictures of paintings that I really like, and I stick them up on my wall. So I'm physically surrounded by art and media 24/7. But then I'm also on my phone, on social media. I have like the Kindle app, so I read on my phone. I do everything on my phone. So it's a lot.
Yeah.
A lot of hours.
Yeah, kind of going off of what they're saying, especially with their phones. Like, if I'm not doing schoolwork, I'm always on my phone, either listening to music, watching YouTube, looking on TikTok, which that
America's favorite pastime.
yeah, it's my pastime. And like, even when it's not like something important, it could be someone making food. They're trying to spread how to use food, how to cook food. But it's like someone trying to get a message out. Either way, it's all over the place for me, at least.
No, that's good. You guys are pretty accurate. In 2019, the average American daily spent about 12 hours and 9 minutes with media. So over half of our day and most of our waking hours, we are constantly surrounded by media in all of its forms, whether it be social media, whether it be art, whether it be books, whether it be TikTok. And I'm sure as the new generation comes up, that number is going to get exponentially bigger because everything that we're doing, especially during this COVID-19 pandemic, is being moved online. And online, you are exposed to so much media because of just little things like advertisements. Every website that you go on has an ad for something. Even if you're not specifically looking at that ad, you are exposed to it. Whether it makes you feel annoyed that there's an ad there, or you're like, oh, I like this. I might want to look into this. So generally, I personally think that every generation is going to make this number rise as we continue to go on. Now, that being said about the online media usage, where do you guys find your news in this incredibly mediated world?
This is the moment where I admit something that's really stupid. My toxic trait. When I am in like an angry mood, I go on like Breitbart just to see how much I hate the world and how much I hate people. In general, though, I have, I think, 4 news applications on my phone, so I get most of my news from NPR, BBC, USA Today, and Washington Post, which I know Washington Post has a huge liberal bias, but I like reading their op-eds, so.
I will also say my toxic trait, because I normally start on Twitter, but I'm saying I start there because I like to keep track of what's trending. And so I start there, see what is like hot right now. And then I normally text my mom because my mother, for many years of her life, was a journalist. So there is a reason. And then I go searching, like I use like Google, and I don't really have a specific site or publication I look for, but I try and look at a couple.
I would say I'm pretty similar to Katie. A lot of times I'll just be on social media. So mostly I'd say like Snapchat, TikTok, or Instagram. And then if there's something on there that I see that either interests me or maybe it confuses me or I feel like it's not adding up, I will then go and research and try and find multiple sources to figure out what's the truth.
Yeah, I'm also similar between the two of them because like when I'll mainly find what I'm looking at on like Facebook or Instagram, maybe even TikTok, and then if it sounds weird, I'll go and research it more, and if I still am confused by it, I'll look at some other sources, and that's how I normally get my news.
All right, so 3 of you see things on social media. 1 of you has news apps. Kendall, how often would you say you go onto your news apps voluntarily? I know you said you go on Breitbart when you're angry, but when you just want to find news, is that where you go, or do you also use social media?
So I get push notifications for all of those things, and I also have CNN set to be like my homepage. So I see a lot of those things kind of like when I'm just like starting out. So I mean, I got a Washington Post alert like 10 minutes ago. And so honestly, sometimes it's just me reading the headline because a lot of the times I don't really care about like the Fed chair or about things like that. And then I open them all at least once a day. I listen to NPR a lot when I'm driving or doing creative works or things like that. But I see things on Twitter and Instagram, but I haven't curated my feed to have those as prevalent in the way that I think a lot of other people have.
Okay. All right. Now, the three of you, when you see news articles on social media, you said you usually just scroll and sometimes you'll see a headline that doesn't add up. Is there anything in particular that you've noticed that piques your interest or just generally makes you want to do more research? And this is a question for all of you. What kinds of accounts do you follow on social media? Do you notice a pattern or a trend with the content that you see or you interact with?
So I actually don't really follow a lot of like news sources per se, but I do follow a lot of comedians. And I think especially in this time period, a lot of them are tweeting specifically about certain current events. So there's a couple who I think double as comedians and like activists. I know that's like kind of funny to say, but normally I'm looking at what they're saying, and if it's about something that's currently happening, then I go search for that. Like, I kind of want to just know what everybody's talking about, so I don't really like a lot of, like, I don't follow a lot of, like, huge movie stars or TV stars. It's mostly, like, comedians or, like, smaller productions. So I'm kind of looking for, like, what's the buzz? Like, what are people talking about? And that's what catches my eye. Like, if I see a couple different people tweeting about one thing, then that's what I'm going to go look for.
I feel like every time I'm like, I agree with what Katie said. But again, I agree with what Katie said. I've been following a lot more. Because normally a lot of my social media is just like my friends. And so I don't follow, again, like a ton of like celebrities or anything like that. But I have been following more activists. And again, with kind of what Katie had said about, if I see one theme or one message being pushed a lot of times it might not be that I think they're wrong, but I just want to see what the counter argument is, or try and find out what's in reinforcing that statement or that message, and just kind of getting to the root of it.
I follow all of my representatives on Twitter. I follow both of my senators, my state representative, and the governor of my state, the lieutenant governor of my state, and both of the front runners for the current gubernatorial elections in my state. So I think I tend to like see a lot of that aspect, like the politics aspect, and again, like being a political science major, that is kind of well relevant. On Instagram though, I just follow my friends, and I think it's very interesting. We kind of hit this wave of like social media, like social justice, which I'm not confident is doing a lot, but it is something that has been like an increase. So now, my Instagram story is 6 months ago, I'd see people and it was a lot of like, here's a picture of my new bathing suit, or like, here's a picture of my dog, or the cool sunset. And now it's a lot of like, here's how we defund the police, and which is awesome, like, and fun, but I worry a lot, and that I have trouble with aspects of that as well, especially like people are like, I'm gonna change my profile picture, and I'm like, when are you going to change that back? Like, when do you decide you stop caring?
So, when I mainly see the media or the news on a social media or social platform, I've run into it either through song, like there's been songs that have some type of meaning behind it, or I've run into an art piece.
I'll comment on your answer. That's interesting that you mentioned music and art, because so far everybody else kind of said social media, news apps, just following like political figures or even just comedians who tweet about politics. And this isn't even necessarily a question about politics, but that is a lot of what we're seeing today in our current political climate. So I think it's interesting that you mentioned music, because a lot of people don't realize that some of the music that they listen to does have a double meaning to it.
Yeah. Well, I do listen to a lot of Black artists, and I listen to some rappers. And while I think there are a couple different like genres of rap, I think that there's like a pretty big overlap between like certain rap music and then like certain poetry. And I think that both of those, especially when done by the Black community, tend to have messages and tend to have some like hidden meaning. So I think a lot of times when I'm listening to like kind of artistic rap is like the way I like to think of it. It's very lyrically like challenging. A lot of the time that has like different meaning. And even looking at some kind of hip hop, looking at some of its origins, especially in America, there's a lot of, you know, politically charged, like very activist charged message in it, and that's a lot of what I listen to.
Anybody else notice in your music? Have you noticed this before now that it's pointed out to you that a lot of the music you might listen to has a double meaning to it, or?
My music taste is so garbage. I'm like, I listen to folk pop from 2007. No, but I mean, I do listen to a lot of like pop punk and punk, which has like been rooted in like alternative culture and just like general like anti-establishment culture. And I that music has always been about rebellion, and not rebellion, that's a little intense, but has always been like a commentary of the media. It's just that I'm listening to music from 2004, and so it's a lot about like Bush.
What was going on back then?
Yeah.
Right.
Sorry to step in again, but I think that a lot of like pieces of creativity, a lot of like things that are artistic tend to have like a meaning, especially like not always, but like angry meanings. It feels like there's no other way to express it but through song or but through art.
Well, to kind of build off of that, in a lot of both my psychology and art classes, we talk about how different art media serve as kind of like a time capsule. And it's kind of relating to what Katie had said about like you have so many emotions, you just need an outlet, you need to get it out. So that's why it's really easy a lot of times to look back in history and say, oh, maybe I'm wrong, but like the Beatles or Bob Dylan or whoever, those are very influential artists, and they conveyed these messages, they connected to people in this way. A lot of times it's hard to recognize that in the moment, but yeah, a lot of times art does serve as that outlet or that time capsule. So it's important to reflect on it.
I was kind of thinking, like, going off what you were saying, because even in choir in high school, we would do different song pieces, and say it was like how Katie was saying earlier with the Black community, we would sing songs, and there was such a deep feeling that even while singing, you could feel like whatever they were trying to convey, and even throughout the years, like it still shows in a way.
I am gonna touch on Brenna's answer for the next question, but I will move us along. How you said that music, a lot of the time, it has to be reflected on later, and it's very hard to recognize it now. So the next question is, how often do you find yourself interacting with content that might oppose or contradict your views and opinions, even if you're not really aware of it in the moment? And as a follow-up to that question, I'll let you think about it while you're answering. Where do these contradicting articles or pieces come from? Are they sources that you regularly see online or in the media that you're exposed to every day?
I have two answers. The first is not as good of an answer, but my first thought is like things that are satirical, like things that I guess from my point of view are either poking fun of or making commentary of a different point of view. That's really what I like feel like it gets brought up in like a big media sense. So like I said, comedy. But my other thought is Facebook. There's a lot of people on Facebook, including in my own family, who have contradictory views. And especially for those in my family, I'm kind of forced to see those because I can't block them. I am a big fan of like blocking people because I personally think that there is a lot of good to be had with like discussions and good discourse about things. Yeah. However, personally, at a certain point, I can no longer take it, and that is when I block people, because, especially when it's hateful messages, I have no interest in hearing that at this point in my life. So I guess Facebook, my cousins, my aunts, not to name it anyone in particular.
No, that's a good start. Facebook, I feel, is one that we can all definitely relate to, in that we have a lot of family members on Facebook that we might not necessarily agree with on every issue that comes up, and like Katie said, we have to see them because they're our family up until a certain point.
To touch on your original answer, Katie, I thought that was very interesting. There's something I was thinking about today while it's existing. And the idea of like comedy and the idea of punching up and punching down and things like that. Because I think there's this really weird phenomenon that happens where like satire and things like that like completely go over audiences' head. I think of Always Sunny as kind of an example where you're like, the thing is like, if you're a racist, homophobic, like sexist person, sorry, Always Sunny like isn't for you. I know that you think it's for you, but it isn't for you. And the idea that like the point there is like they're making fun of like people who are bad people, and like the idea of like existing and enjoying media where the fan base is predominantly like not aligning with your views is something very interesting. It happens with a lot of media, especially when they touch on things like race and gender and sexuality, where like it gets divisive, and you think like a lot of times the joke is the comedy writer is making fun of homophobic people, and like the joke is on the people who think like the ones who are laughing, basically. I think it's Bo Burnham, who is very, he made a joke about like, oh, don't you hate it when you're, I'm just gonna say this in the most like not gross way possible, okay. But like, don't you hate it when you're having sex with a man and then he turns out to be gay? And like that's a joke on homophobia, but then, and he doesn't say it like that at all, but like, but then there's these people who are laughing because they think it's a joke on like homosexuality. And I think that's a really like weird subdivision where you're like, a person or a type of content or a show can have this subset of their fans who like they don't like and don't enjoy and like aren't making the content for them, and it's really weird.
No, you bring up the interesting point of sometimes satire goes right over people's heads, even if they're the ones that the message was intended for. That's the whole purpose of the question. Do you think that ever happens to you? Do you ever think that sometimes you'll see a joke that may be making fun of your political views and you laugh at it because you think they're wrong and you think it's funny that somebody could think this?
I'd love to say no, but it has probably happened. I'm sure it has. I do like to pretend that I am very good at like knowing the joke and like being in on it, but I am sure that someone has been like, ah ha ha, you think this, and I've been like, I do think this, but they were making fun of me.
Yeah, kind of going off of that, that's probably definitely happened to me, because like there's sometimes where I won't get a joke and I'll just be like, again, ha, that's funny, and it may not even really be funny, it might just be something that is, again, making fun of what you think or what your views are, kind of like that.
I think, like, personally, my views are pretty far on one side of the political spectrum, so I'll see these posts from centrists that are like, actually, like, liberals don't want to defund the police, we just want to, like, no, and I'm like, no, I do want to defund the police. It's like, actually, liberals don't want to, like, do this, that's an overreaction. I'm like, actually, no, I do. Like, I do want to legalize all abortions. Like, no, I do want to, like, so I think, like, there's something funny in the fact that I do, like, I watch these people be like, oh, you're, like, this is, like, funny because it's an over-exaggeration. And I'm like, no, like, that's just how I feel, and I don't really care.
So, leading off of that, bringing it back around, where do you see these things? And do you see them often in your media?
I mostly see people who are like-minded to me making fun of those people. And not even in like a really like, oh, that person's so dumb, I hate them, not in a sort of detrimental, like, oh, I'm making fun of you, but in a, there's, what, is there a Reddit thread? It's like r/whoosh, and it's when the joke goes right over your head. And so I see that on TikTok, I see, my sister sends me them from Reddit, I see them on Twitter, and it's mostly people commenting on the people who missed the joke.
All I can think of is there was this TikTok that went viral. This TikTok, I don't know what you call it, TikToker. And she's like very aggressively like into Christianity and like very interested in converting others to her beliefs. And she made a couple TikToks that went very viral. And one of them was like, if you're not living for Christ, what do you like? If someone asked what you are, like, would they say you were a believer in Christ or something? And like, the only times I've ever seen that video is someone making fun of it. And then there's another one where she was like, oh, you're gonna say that Jesus wasn't real, but Abraham Lincoln is? And obviously she was making a point. Listen, I'm a Jew, and I can tell you that like, Jesus is a historical figure. I just don't think he's not the Messiah. But, like, she was making a point, and, like, for her followers, like, yeah, good job, valid point, but I see that, and I'm like, baby girl, do you not believe in Lincoln? So I think, I know that has to happen on the other end, and that's why I don't make viral TikToks.
Well, and I think it's interesting to talk about TikTok because I do feel like that's where I see a lot of like that satire and a lot of what we're talking about. But then I also think about how TikTok is like created for you with the algorithm and everything. So then I'm trying to think about like what that says about me, or like kind of reflecting upon that, the fact that like, well, this is what I'm getting. So how do others perceive me, even if it's just like artificial intelligence?
No, that's a good lead off, because you all bring up the point. Most of your social media, it's videos of others making fun of people for making fun of you. And that is what you see. So you see not the original video, you see the part of it that you agree with. So the next question, what does this tell you about how biased or unbiased your media is? Can you recognize that now?
Very biased.
Very biased.
I'm sure it's very biased, and part of that is my own doing, and part of that is a lot of, especially social media sites, and I mean even Netflix. It looks at what you're liking, what you're watching, and it's giving you more of that because it doesn't want you to go anywhere else. So why would it give you opposing views? Why would it make you angry?
That is a good point, because like, if it weren't for the For You page on TikTok, I wouldn't be spending like 2 hours just scrolling through it because I like the video. I would just be like, oh, this is not my thing, toss it to the side. But no, because it's focused on what I like. It's like, oh, wasting half the day, it's fine.
It's fine, because I'm enjoying videos that I'm seeing.
It's incredibly effective.
Mm-hmm. I think there's a safety in bias. Not even just that it doesn't challenge you, but I think that I'm well aware that everything I see has a bias, and I'm fine with that, and I do like take proactive steps. But I also think there are times, especially when you're in a minority group or things like that, where living with that bias is the safest way you can live. Like, if TikTok was just you saw whatever content you were posting, I don't think I could handle like watching people like tell me I shouldn't have a right to marry every day, or watching people like drop the F slur. And I think it's even like more prominent for those marginalized groups. Like, there's a safety in that bias, in that bubble that people have to create online, because like it's just not like the real world isn't reflective of that. Like when you like grow up in Hicktown and you're like ready to get hate crimes every 20 minutes. Like, I'm glad I had that bias, and I'm glad I had that world I can turn to, because I don't know what I would have done as this like closeted queer teen in a town of 2,000 rednecks, like what I would have done if I didn't have that space. And so I know that it creates like this echo chamber, and I know that it creates like some issues, but I don't ever want to like fully admonish that bias because I think it keeps like especially queer teens safe, and I think it's an important identifier in our new age.
Yeah, I was going to say a lot of what Kendall touched on, so I'll just expand upon what she had said. I agree that like having certain areas of your media that you know are safe and that are for you is really important. But I also think it's important that you acknowledge that that's what that is. That to use the term Kendall said, that like it's an echo chamber, that you're going to be seeing stuff that reflects you, which isn't necessarily bad, but I think you just need to be able to identify that when I'm spending time on this platform, I'm not really going to see the counterpoint. So maybe spending time to try and find, not necessarily a counterpoint, but just other opinions and other views as well.
I will say I'm loving Brenna's answers because they keep leading to my next questions. So my final question for you, although it can sort of be split into two, would be how can you feel that you can change the inherent bias in your media, and do you want to?
I think in order, like a way to kind of check your own bias and everything else is to have conversations. That's something Katie had touched upon earlier. I'm a big believer that conversation is really the only way to bring about change. So having platforms like Facebook or even Instagram where I do follow people that have different beliefs than me, you know, it's a way that we can start a conversation. I won't always necessarily start something over social media because I feel like that gets messy. But if, you know, an opportunity ever arises and if I feel comfortable having a conversation or starting something with someone, then I think that's a good opportunity to have it. I kind of want to say that, like, I don't necessarily want to seek it out because there are certain beliefs that I have that, like, I don't really want to give into the other counterpoint. Like, something like climate change or something like that. I'm not going to be flexible on, you know, to me, climate change is a very real thing. It's a very serious issue. And I don't want to have to kind of cater to other people being like, no, it's fake. Science isn't real. Like, I don't believe that, so I don't really want to feed into it.
Yeah, I think there's a difference between like an echo chamber of affirmation and an echo chamber of negativity. And I think that's where like the problem arises. Like there's nothing wrong with the fact that like there's like a subset of the world where like this trans teen not out at home is like using the correct pronouns online and things like that, and that is feeling like affirmed and feeling safe. But I think when it gets to that point where it's like negativity, I think that's really a problem. Or like there's a difference between like I feel safe and I don't feel uncomfortable because people aren't like, because there hasn't been a space where people are like denying my identity or denying my rights or like basic human things, and there's a difference between that and saying like I'm on the QAnon subreddit and I believe that JFK Jr. is alive and he is coming to announce that he is going to be Trump's running mate. That is not a joke. That is a conspiracy theory that was really prevalent literally 2 days ago. And so like I think like creating your space and having your people and things like that is safe, and doing what's safe for you is important. So if you're like, there's a difference between checking your bias and seeking out other points of view, that like between that and then like opening yourself up for harm. So like if you're I keep using like the idea of like being young trans kid, but if you're like a young trans kid and you're having like a safe space, like no one's gonna ask you to then go and like I do it, but no one else should like go out on Breitbart and like see that people think you should be killed just for protesting or like. But so I think like I'm in a space in my life where I'm okay and I'm mentally well enough and I feel comfortable enough with myself that I'm alright seeking out other points zoning laws, but like things that are like actual politics versus like identity. Like I will talk to you about private school versus public school. I'll talk your ear off, and I will fully believe I'm right, but I also like acknowledge that there are other point of views, and so things like that I think is really important. Like I'm a kid who went to a public school for most of their lives, like doesn't really have the experience, but has a lot of biases against private schools. And that is like a thing I'm like that is fair and that's up for debate and that's things that like you can see multiple perspectives of. But I think the fear is like the idea that people like should automatically be open to debating basic human rights and identity. And like people will get on Facebook and be like, why don't you debate with me about like whether or not you should be gunned down in the street by police? And you're like, what are you on? So like I like my own little safe space I've carved out on the internet. I know that very term will make people's heads spin, but I'm happy, I'm comfortable, and I don't want to cry every time I access the internet. So
I'm gonna agree with Kendall on that because, like, while I do acknowledge that there's different points of view, and I won't have like I'm gonna go and fight someone if they have a different view than me. It is good to have, like a safe space that you can go to get like a breather, kind of. So in that sense, I would say I wouldn't want to leave my bias. However, like again, there are times where I've even left Facebook because of like all the things that have been happening. Like people just pick fights for no reason, and then if you say you're wrong, they're like arguing with each other, and it's just like a whole mess. So I was just like, I'm just gonna leave Facebook by itself and just stay on Instagram. But yeah, it is good to have that safe space, kind of.
Yeah, I completely agree with what everyone else has said. I like to talk. Like, I like to talk a lot. I like to discuss. I like to have conversations. I even like to disagree with people. But I think there's a really big difference when I'm disagreeing with my mom, who at all of our core values, we believe the same thing. There is something very true to both of us that we align. There are many, many things that we disagree on that goes further than that. And that's probably as far as I'll go with people. I think there is a certain level where I'm going to stop, where I have to stop talking to people about certain things. I mean, personally, I do talk about like Black issues a lot. That's a big thing. And I think that sometimes there's this expectation that you have to tell someone that they're wrong. Like you see, like if somebody's wildly off base, I'm not speaking to them depending on what it's about. Like I don't need to hear that. That does nothing for me. And if I know that me speaking to them does nothing for them, I'm not doing it. I don't think that there's any value in it. And for me, it's about looking at the value of these discussions. Like, will this turn into something that expands both of our horizons? When it's me and my mom, yeah. When it's me and my sister, yeah. When it's me and like my friends, yes. Especially, I mean, at Cedar Crest, I think a lot of our classes have that room for discussion. But if somebody in my class is like, gay people can't get married, I'm not, nope, there's nothing I can say to you. If they're like, Black people should have less rights, there's nothing there. There's nothing for me, there's nothing for you. And I'm not going to seek that out. I would never willingly seek that out. Even when I see it, I get mad and I retreat into those, like Kendall said, safe spaces. So I think it's really about what's going to come of looking at a different opinion, because certain ones, like there's certain things that just you don't need. And that's all I have to say.
No, I think it's very interesting that you all agree on the fact that people do need that safe space online. So, as Kendall said, they don't hate the world every time they open their phones. But you all also agree that sometimes these spaces and these biases need to be challenged and changed, so you do understand the bigger picture of what's going on in the world. I think that's a very interesting concept, and I think it's amazing that you all realize that. So that's all the questions I have for you. And once again, I want to thank you all for participating in the first episode of this podcast. I hope you took something new away from this conversation, and I really hope that everyone else listening does too. So thank you all, and I hope you all have a wonderful day.